All right, you joyously miserable accursed. It's a gorgeous Monday morning, 31 degrees here at the Home Office in Regina, Saskatchewan. And your political panel has an overabundance of testosterone this week. Alas, Jordan Leichnitz ain't here due to her actual professional responsibilities with the Friedrich Ebert Stiff Tongue Schultz and Klink Foundation. We hobble along without her, with Kory volunteering to pinch hit with the NDP point of view, right, Kory?
Yes, yeah, I'll be covering that off.
Yep. So I'm David Herle. I'm here with Scott Reid and the aforementioned Mr. Teneycke. How are you fellas?
I'm
I'm in the
feeling
land of
great.
lemon heart and cheese whiz, so I'm in good shape.
Uh,
Cheese Whiz.
Yeah.
Uh, Cheese Whiz is awesome. I love
and I'm
Cheese
there with
Whiz.
you, back
Yeah.
in the place of our birth, our lineage, Regina, Saskatchewan.
I feel badly. I'd like to say, hey, guys, cool. Guess what? I'm also in Regina, but I'm not. So I'm in my basement, as you will frequently find me in
Yeah.
my basement, week after week, day after day, hour after hour, drink after drink in my basement.
Hey, have you picked a team for the playoffs, Scott?
Yeah, I'd say Oilers, although, I'm extraordinarily distressed about their goaltending situation. So,
Look, I was all
um,
set up for overtime the other night, and then bang.
yeah, like don't skate toward the bench before the last fucking second is ticked off, like guy went fishing too early. Yeah, I don't know. I'm also watching the Leafs. I have to admit, I know this will hurt you and anger you, but I can't help it. Like I live in downtown Toronto and people are fucking Leaf crazy. And like I'm watching them and I really thought based on the first couple games of the series and the first series, I thought this is a different looking team.
New
Berube's
Leafs.
got
These are
them
the
rough.
new Leafs. These are the Berube Leafs.
They are. And but now they come back tied, so who knows?
Yeah.
They're going to have to not be themselves. We'll see.
All right, here's the rundown this week. Carney, the latest in whatever there is. Prime Minister Carney had his Oval Office moment with President Trump, talking about non-transactional real estate. We'll talk about that. New cabinet's coming. We'll do a little speculating. I don't really want to guess who's in. That's kind of bogus. But we should talk
Uh,
about how it should look and what it should be like. Our cursed clipping is from Catherine May at the Ottawa Citizen and I think Policy Magazine, writing about the Carney government's ability to break through government gridlock and deliver on his ambitious priorities. And then the eternal Mr. Pinsent will arrive to wrap things up with our hey yous. So, uh, Kory, Scott and I have been running our mouths about hockey, so why don't we start off with you? Um, and just let's start off with the Washington trip. Pretty good reviews for that trip. Did you have any expectations that weren't met there?
I don't think so. I was a little disappointed that we couldn't come up with a better soundbite for him than the one he actually used. Like normally we shoot past the mark and give better advice than people do themselves. But I thought the soundbite that he gave to the obvious 51st state, blathering uh, was as good as anything I could think up. Better, in fact, I think, in terms of what he actually said. It's a great line, and I think it landed really well. I gotta
Yeah, but
say,
talking with the owners, it was a great phrase.
it's
I hadn't really heard that put that way. So
yeah, and putting it in terms that wouldn't be offensive to him, but that were clear, and I think that's what he had to do. Uh, I gotta say, watching that press conference in its entirety was painful. Like I don't know how anyone can sit in that Oval Office and listen to that stream of consciousness and bullshit that comes out of Trump's mouth on a wide variety of topics of which he understands little and yet says a lot. It's painful. Like that must have been hard.
well, Trump
uh,
speaks like for 90% of the time,
yeah, like
right?
yeah, 90% of it, but like this rambling stream of consciousness that was pretty hard to listen to. I had a chuckle. I think it was Tonda McCharles who asked in the press conference that he then held. I assume it was on the roof of the Canadian Embassy. Uh, it said like, couldn't tell what you were thinking while Trump was talking. And he
Good
chuckles
thing.
and says, I'm glad you couldn't tell what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Uh, because I can't imagine it was anything very flattering, given what was happening there. So, look, I don't think that you could ask for more as a Canadian from what happened in that meeting, and there was a lot of risk going into it, as we discussed last week, and to come out unscathed and with some path towards what you're going to do on tariffs and other things is as close to victory as I think you're ever going to have with the Trump presidency.
A couple of weeks ago in this space, I quoted a huge number, a number that, when you peel back all the zeros, is gorgeously human. I told you that over our presenting sponsor Telus's last 25 years, their people have contributed 2.4 million days of community volunteerism. That figure just grows, and there's a reason for that. Telus does business via social purpose, a bedrock belief that when communities and ecosystems thrive, so does business. Never better exemplified than right now during the entire month of May, aka the 20th annual Telus Days of Giving. This is tens of thousands of team members, families, customers, and retirees across 33 countries coming together in what, on this continent, has been recognized as North America's largest corporate volunteering initiative. If you can think of a worthwhile activity to help a community, Telus team members and retirees volunteer to do it. Shoreline cleanup, tree planting, blood donations, youth mentoring, device recycling, food bank support, and a ton more. Last May, they broke their own Telus Days of Giving record for the second year in a row, with 1.5 million hours volunteered, more than any other company in the world. But all of it is the result of this: people caring enough to do good things in their own communities, meaningful individual actions that, when taken together, have great impact globally. Telus has been with us on our pods for over 6 years now. I know many of their good people listen to this show, and I'm deeply appreciative. So, on behalf of myself and Telus, I speak to you directly and say thank you. Thank you for joining in the effort this May and every May past as you give your time and energy to make a difference in the places you live. He only gets one like that, though, Scott, doesn't he? Like, pretty soon you got to have a deliverable, don't you? You have to have a outcome.
I think that's right. I think that we're so conditioned by the crazy. We're so we all live like hand-shy dogs in fear of a lunatic being in charge of the largest economy, military nation on the world. Well, I guess they're not the largest nation in the world, but largest economy and military. That, we're kind of like, okay, can he get through the Oval? Like, does the prime minister just get through the Oval without being put in a, headlock? Does he make it? So we're all like, yeah, okay. So, like, almost universally, you hardly heard a single person from any political corner say, not good enough, but what's happening? So I got a couple quick observations about it. First of all, I just want to say, like, just building on Kory's point about why should we, like, this is fucked, eh? Like, the world is fucked. It is not right that sovereign leaders of substance, no matter where they come from, who are duly elected by their people,
get put into a TV show format.
Get slammed into this thing. Look at it. Look at my beautiful room. Look at you see my, and it's all gaudy, tacky, gilded bullshit. And then listen to this guy ramble about Obama's library or whatever weird bullshit goes through his mind. And you have to make this horrifying judgment as to how much do I stand up to the bear in order to get the bear's respect versus how much do I quarrel with the bear for fear the bear will give me a big paw across the head. And so, but like, this is no way to run a railway, man. And this is no way to run the world. And this guy's running the world, and it's wrong. And he's unchallenged. I mean, the courts of the United States aren't challenging him. Congress isn't challenging him. The Democrats have basically just gone outside to smoke a spliff and figure out whether or not they're ever going to get back off the couch. So this guy is unchallenged, and it's really depressing that world leaders have to be put
in
to
the
that
fight. You would expect Schumer to lead.
Yeah, exactly. Let's get him. Let's get him. It's time for that place to be swept clean with the broom of generational change. One other thing I would say about observation of the prime minister's conduct in the White House. It's not easy, eh? Like, watching that thing, like, I don't know about you guys, but I was wired in for CTV, and I'm watching this thing live, and I'm holding my breath for 40 minutes. I realize, like, I am white knuckle the whole time. And, if you're him, You go in with a plan. He obviously had that line. Agree with you guys. Thought it was a beautiful way, very clever, very elegant way to sort of do it. But you don't know how Trump could just as easily, if he decided it was in his interest, or he just decides on a whim, right? Well, don't tell me about real estate. I'll tell you about real estate. Roy Kahn told me, piss on everything that you can stand over top of. And there you go. Like, he could have gone crazy. Or even just the uncomfortable circumstance where you're asking yourself and second guessing yourself. Like, if you're the prime minister, you don't know when you're done. You go, well, he starts rambling on about how I don't need anything from Canada, right? So you think you have a plan, which is, I'm going to intervene on the 51st state. I'm not going to fact check him. I'm not going to intervene on everything. But when we start rambling hard on that, you're thinking to yourself, and you could see Carney. You could see him kind of leaning forward. He was just about to interject. Trump ended it, so he didn't have to, and he didn't end up getting the opportunity to. But you have to be sitting there wondering, well, wait a second. How did that go? Like, are people going to say, Jesus Christ, I can't believe he just let all that fly by and doesn't go? You don't know in the moment. You might have a plan, but you don't know in the moment.
You have to say to yourself, I'm going to let all of the bullshit go, and I will only intervene on a fact that cannot be allowed to stand.
I agree with that.
You make $200 trillion off of us every year or something, right?
That's what you think. That's what I think. Maybe that's what Kory thinks. But if you have to actually live that, and then maybe you don't, you follow the plan, maybe there's bad reviews though. Maybe you come out and actually doesn't bounce that way. And people go, I can't believe he just let this guy ramble on and trample all over us for all that and only spoke up once. So you don't know for sure how it's going to go. All I'm saying is it's not easy. And I thought that he handled it graciously and successfully. Final thing I would say, we don't know what happened in that 2-hour meeting. Now, the 2-hour meeting might have just Trump been, talking about the price of dentures or, his favorite historical fiction. We have no idea. But it's also possible, and I think equally probable, that they're more substantive conversations. And maybe there are hints of process and mechanisms going forward. And all I would say is this is my speculative fiction almost now. If there was, I think the government if there were kernels of hope in that working luncheon, I think the government was wise not to roll them out. If there's any hope of process going forward, good to not go out and share any of that, because you just don't know what he says on Tuesday, whether it be fulfilled on Wednesday. Get some wheels under things. If there wasn't any of that, well, then you got work to do. If there was some of it, wise on them to hold it back, because you don't know where things are going to go next.
So there's a film on the National Film Board website titled She's a Railroader. You can go watch it free. It's an old short, 9 minutes long, shot on Kodak stock, full of anachronisms. The protagonist, Karen Zaitchik, smokes a cigarette on camera and plays tennis with one of those old wooden rackets and sports a thoroughly 70s look, along with everybody else in the film. It is, after all, 1978. At the time, Karen was a railway switcher. The camera follows her as she trots along beside CN trains, pulling pins and supervising couplers as they engage with enough power to crush anything or anyone who gets in too close. It can be heavy work, she says. You have to be able to handle it. That's why a lot of girls couldn't do it, just like a lot of guys couldn't do it. She's surrounded on the tracks by men, some shirtless, but she's the one attaching and detaching rolling boxcars. The film is a snap from a much different time. A woman railroader was rare enough 47 years ago to merit her own NFB film. Women first broke into the railways during the Second World War, when most of the men fit for hard work were overseas in uniform. It was a tough go, but women like Karen Zaitchik not only did it, they broke ground for the much larger cohort of women who switch and brake and drive CN's trains today. Some managed to raise families at the same time. We've recently celebrated Mother's Day, and CN salutes them. The company is better for their dedication and strength. While we're at it, a word about CN's Cycle for Chio event a couple of weeks back. 6,300 people turned out to raise money for kids with cancer at the Children's Hospital of Eastern Ontario. The 100-kilometer CN Century Ride portion was sold out. It has raised more than $2 million and counting. Well done. Really, well done. I mean, I hear you tactically, but Kory, I mean, if they're starting to have conversations about a new economic and security relationship with the United States that is fundamentally different than the one we currently have, when do I start to understand some of the inklings of what that is, what that is?
Maybe not for quite a while. Like
Yeah.
I see, Dom
Well, I'm a
LeBron.
citizen. I'm kind of curious.
Well, but like I
Yeah.
think if we look at last time we went through this, the Canadian strategy was play for time and let the midterms and concerns around that be your friend in helping to pressure the Americans to getting to a deal. I'm not sure that's a bad strategy this time as well. Like I think going first in some of these deals that are happening is probably not to Canada's advantage. Like Canada has been going first on almost all of this shit. And I don't think it's been a great experience for us.
Right.
I think that if we're in a position where they're more or less respecting CUSMA, and of course they're not completely, but I think we're probably in a better position than most other countries today in doing this. Why not wait a little bit and see what others are going to get, how those conversations are going? Like, big news in terms of what's happened with China that I guess we'll hear later today. But we don't know as we're recording this exactly what that looks like. But there are other shoes to drop here, and uh, I think the U.S. has backed down on some of this and is seeking to have deals now because I think they bit off more than they could chew. And I think there's some pressure on them to actually come to agreements with folks. And Canada is one of the most important countries, if you're the United States, to come to an agreement with, because for all of Trump's bluster about how they don't do any business with us, that ain't fucking true. They do a lot of business with us. We're the number one market for more than a dozen states for their exports. So I gotta think that time is on our side, and I think we should be playing for time a little bit if we are able to. The other thing I'd say is I don't think you walk out with all the concessions that you might have to make publicly until you have an agreement. Because like that's you might have to make those and you might not. And like if you roll those out publicly before you have a deal, well, they might just be taken off the table. And now a deal is even further away than it was before you started talking. So I think we got to be really careful. But you can probably guess what a lot of them are based on prior agreements and based on some of the things that Trump has said. They're going to put a lot of pressure on us on autos, clearly, on steel and aluminum, clearly, on supply management for dairy and poultry, clearly. But what else? I don't know.
We've been through this 3 months of constant threat, and you're right, Canada being on the front lines of this, being the first people that were sort of engaged. But at this conference I was at a couple of weeks ago, Francis Donald said, when all the dust is cleared, Canada still has the best access to the U.S. market of any country in the world.
Right. That's not surprising. I think that point is valid. I think things will get better over time. I think the rush to do something with China, and what a gong show that was. They announced that they've got a deal, but we don't know what the deal is, and there's no real evidence that there is a deal. But still, I think that betrays Trump's new political imperative, which he's recognizing that the self-inflicted tariff policy is costing him politically and economically, and he has now to be seen. And he'll therefore say, look, I told you it was going to hurt at first, and now I'm fixing it. And we never would have gotten these things that we've gotten if it hadn't been for me and my great strength and blah, blah, blah. Fine, whatever the fuck. Tell it to the mountaintop. And so it starts China. And I think it makes sense for us. I think logically, you let some of that happen. So then there becomes a momentum for actually doing deals, closing deals, getting some kind of arrangements in place. And in the meantime, we can comfort ourselves with Francis Donald's point. But I still go like, hey, if I'm an auto worker, I'm either no longer working or worried I'm no longer working. If I'm a dairy farmer, I am thinking, and I come from dairy farmers. All my family's had to sell their quota except for one. But, you're sitting around going, man, am I going to be the last piece of the puzzle that clicks in?
let's clear this up though. You're not Reid's Dairy in Belleville, right?
No, we're not Reed's Dairy. No, Reed's Dairy. Reed's Dairy was started, according to family mythology, by my great great uncle Frank, but sold off, and then the Quickerts purchased it, and they're still owned by the Quickert family, and they're good people. Played with Dave Quickert in football, Centennial University, Centennial Secondary, I should say. There is no university. But yeah, but if you're a dairy farmer, you're worried. You're thinking, I could easily be, particularly if the government adopts Kory's advice and says, all right, we're not going to actually draw public red lines because we're not going to hem ourselves in. So then you're sitting in a state of kind of ambiguity. If you're forestry, if you're dairy, you're thinking, I could be that give at the end that closes the deal. And maybe I don't like that so much. In fact, I don't like that so much. So we're going to live with fear and anxiety for quite a bit, I think.
Right.
But I think with autos, like this is, where I think the sounds coming out of the president are probably the most deeply felt. Like he is clearly does not want to see an auto industry in Canada. That is a real problem for us.
No, he's from what's good for GM is good for America world of thinking from 1960s, right?
And the abatement that we've gotten on some of the tariffs is not complete on autos. And I think what he's trying to do is hold Canada's auto industry's head underwater, but not both its nose and its mouth. It's got the water line kind of on the upper lip, right? Like I'm not going to push down so hard that, you actually drown. But I'm going to make it really fucking uncomfortable. And I'm going to, every once in a while, I'll give you a little tap on the head and put you all the way under, and then I'll let you back up, but just you breathe it through your nose, right? Like that's what's going on. And I think, it's going to have the effect of what he wants, which is to bleed out that industry over the next 4 or 5 years. And I think what's incumbent on Canada is to find what we're going to do with all those workers in those factories, because we're going to have to do something with them. But I don't think that he's going to let that one go, is I think the unfortunate reality. We've got to find other things. So whether it's, what Unifor was talking about, military equipment, or whether it's, moving to, produce farm and industrial equipment for people out here in the blessed land of Saskatchewan and elsewhere, we've got to find something to do.
The great battle for Greenland.
Well, or, making parts for nuclear facilities, or making parts for, pipelines, or there's, other things that I think are going to be outcomes of what Canada's going to do in response to this that are potential paths for employment and prosperity. But I don't think it's going to look like what it did on the auto side of things over the longer term. If anything Trump says is to be believed, and I granted that a lot of what Trump says should not be believed, but I think in this area he has had remarkable consistency over many decades.
Our sponsors at Candu have been talking a lot here on the podcast about how Candu Reactor's proven Canadian design helps ensure our energy security. Fact is, no foreign-designed reactor can be built and adapted to Canadian safety standards without a reliance on enriched fuel, processed abroad, and then imported into Canada. Only Candus run on Canadian fuel. So in today's protectionist world, Candu reactors avoid any reliance on foreign countries. They offer us the security of knowing Trump tariffs and moratoriums won't stop our power operators from delivering cheap, reliable, carbon-neutral power to Canadians. And then there's this. Candu recently went on the record in a Globe and Mail interview. They said construction of new reactors in Ontario to buttress the existing high-functioning refurbished fleet would require an expanded workforce of engineers, as well as manufacturing and skilled trades employees. If Trump's tariffs end up harming our auto sector, a wide variety of auto workers could be recruited into the nuclear industry. That's mighty important stuff, because over 125,000 people are directly employed in manufacturing vehicles and parts. Having other options for displaced workers will be critically important in achieving our energy security. Candu reactors have been providing carbon-neutral power for the Canadian economy for over 60 years, employing thousands across the country and producing critical, life-saving medical isotopes used in hospitals across Canada and around the world. Candu technology, designed by Canadians, built by Canadians, for the benefit of Canadians. Let's get moving. So Scott, you had something to say?
Well, I was just going to say that's where Kory's advice on be patient, as unpleasant as it might be, might be most important, because we do know that he wants to do something on the auto sector. We do know that he wants to destroy the auto sector. The vision of an integrated North American auto sector, he wants to burn it to the ground, and ultimately, it's going to take the car companies themselves to say, you just can't do this. And that will take time, because they'll have to get to a place where they feel that they have enough political rope to exert their will. I mean, they got some pauses early on and stuff, but to really go in there with battle armor on, they're going to want to see some things shift around. They're going to want to see a sense of political crisis at the White House. They're going to wait for their moment. And so we have to wait for that.
Really care about making cars in Canada? I mean, I believe they care about making cars in Mexico, but do they actually care about making cars in Canada?
I think we have to hope that they care about the existing system, and that the costs and the discomfort of retooling such a sophisticated supply chain isn't desirable. Can they do it? Can they move? Can they slide in behind the tariff wall? Sure, I guess they could, but that's going to be a years-long effort, and it's going to cost a lot, and it's going to change a lot. So, and it's ultimately going to make every car much more expensive. Like they're going to have to say, listen, you are going to force us to sell cars for a lot more, and that's not good for our business. That's good for our shareholders. That's not good, period. So I think they have a vested interest in the status quo if they can find a way to maintain it.
I think it's going to be tough, though. It's going to be real tough.
Okay, so let's move on to forward looking then to the cabinet tomorrow. And so Trump has this TV talk show lineup with the couches, and each person has their team of people on the couch, their own Ed McMahon, their own Andy Richter, whatever analogy you want to use. And so Carney has three people with him. He's got Dom LeBlanc, he's got Melanie Joly, and he's got David McGuinty as the public security minister.
Doesn't McGuinty look just so happy to be there? Like pinch me. I can't believe I'm actually here. Oh my God.
It's quite a reversal of fortune. But I suspect somehow the PM's going to want to keep Dom involved in that relationship, because he seems to work with everybody, and he's got a great skill for making difficult situations less difficult. Jolie, she could or could not still be in that position. McGuinty, I don't know if he makes the cut on a new cabinet. So, new cabinet. So many considerations. Is it larger than the one he had, or the same size as the one he had, roughly? Is it gender balanced? He says yes. Does it have representation from every province? How many new people are in it? In what positions are new people in? What job does Chrystia Freeland have in this cabinet? There's so many things I think are interesting. Scott, what are you looking at?
Well, I think I start in a slightly different place. I do think if I was just going to do the couch analysis, which is a fun place to start, I think the Dom is most secure. I think the Mel is indispensable to Carney. Really, don't you think? I mean, she's a strong, capable female from Quebec, and yes, there's Trudeau legacy there, but I don't know that you're going to find 5 people that can do what she can do. I don't know that she's going to remain in that portfolio. I think, it becomes a game of scrambled eggs once you start moving portfolios around, right? So there's just zero, like, unless somebody's literally like, I got to keep them there, anything could go. I do think McGuinty is obviously the most vulnerable. I don't know there's anything indispensable about him. I'm not shitting on the guy. I don't know him really, to be honest with you. But I would think that his position is the most susceptible to the fates. But the place I start at is I have this thesis, which is I think that Carney genuinely sees himself as a radical prime minister, or maybe he doesn't see himself as a radical, but I think he sees himself as a prime minister who's serving in a time of crisis and who therefore has a set permissions that are rarely extended to prime ministers and politicians. And I think he's going to be pretty bold. And when that comes to transition, I think it means two things. I think it means being crystal clear on what your core priorities are. And you don't go out of your way to say, and therefore I don't care about these other 7 issues. But it is also apparent that if you are vested with authority as a department minister for some of those things that are not critical, not core to his agenda, then take care of these things, mind these things, and make certain that your job is to make certain that they don't drift into the lane of shit I must deal with as prime minister. Because I want to concentrate on these 3 or 4 things. I want to rewire the Canadian economy. I want to reestablish our relationship with the United States. And as a consequence of that, I have to reestablish our relationship with much of the rest of the world. And I want to concentrate on those things. So if you're in charge of healthcare, it's not that I don't care about healthcare. We're liberals, for Christ's sake, right? But I want to keep that thing on the tracks. I do not want to be told that I'm going to have to use 30% of my political capital and energy and time on renegotiating a health accord. I don't want to have to renegotiate a health accord in the next 36 months. Don't want to. Keep the escalator in, keep the transfers going. Let's do something on docs and let me stay focused on these other things. And so when you come from that, you see how this logic of an inner cabinet and other ministers emerge, where he can sort of signal, these are my priorities. This is the team that will be vested with the things that must and will drive us, and that people have said that we as a government have to address and figure out. And so I'll be looking to see, in that sense, how he communicates his priorities, how he establishes and maintains that concentration, and then the people he picks to put in place. Last thing I would say in this top pass on it, I would urge him to focus on change. I just made the case for why Jolie needs to be around, and I think Dom absolutely needs to be around. But I wouldn't have 10 people like that. I wouldn't have, I would place a high emphasis new blood, even if it feels risky, because you are in crisis and you can take a risk. So bring in Carlos Leto, who you persuaded to run from Quebec City. He was the Quebec finance minister for 4 years, and they had a pretty good fiscal record there under Philippe Couillard. I see no reason to follow conventional political reason, which would say, don't make him the finance minister. Oh, let's break him in federally. Fuck that. Put him in place. If you know him and you have confidence in him, Mark Carney, put him in place. Tim Hodgson, former chair of Hydro One. You think he's the kind of guy that can get infrastructure built? If he understands energy and how to move on large scale infrastructure and to get social license, put him in place. And if you need to buttress him with a bunch of people that can fill his political gaps and manage his rookiness, then do that. But I would not hesitate to gamble on new one bit. So I would look for as many fresh faces as possible, and I would really look for if not necessarily for a 2-tier cabinet, maybe it will be, but I would certainly look for a cabinet that's built around this sense of crisis, this climate of concentration and focus on core priorities. And I wouldn't hesitate to, and I wouldn't apologize for that. I wouldn't do that political thing when you back in and go, now I want to tell you everything's important, all the sky and all the moon and all the stars, everything's important. But these are the kind of things no. Take advantage of the moment. You got elected for a reason. And so put the focus where the focus should be.
Kory, pick up there. Let's hypothesize a 30-member cabinet. How many of them should never have been in a cabinet before? Let's say including his own cabinet. Let's say
never been in a cabinet before, or never been in his cabinet, right?
Never been in his cabinet before.
Right. Well, probably quite a few. I agree with the thesis that the electorate wanted change. Provinces want change. The media wants change. If you kind of look across all of the different stakeholders and things that people who are going to give you an opinion on this stuff, I think the almost universal consensus is the less it's like the Trudeau cabinet, the better it is for Carney. And I think you should be really leaning into that. Unless somebody is really bringing something to the table that you need, who's in that cabinet. Like we've talked about many times before, a lot of nobodies, a lot of losers. And I grant that to recycle, previous quote about this, it's hard to build the Eiffel Tower with a box of mismatched Lego, but it's so you have some constraints in people who are capable enough to actually be in cabinet. But I think you're better to err on the side of new. You're better to err on the side of regime change than put these folks back. Like we'll see what happens, I guess, tomorrow when it comes out. But I think it's a lot more than us that have been giving advice that Guilbeault and Wilkinson should not be anywhere near the environment or resource portfolios. Now that's only good if somebody like Hodgson comes in and he's different. If it's just a new face, peddling the same old bullshit, well, that's gonna go over really, really, really poorly. And I don't think you're gonna have the sorts of success that this government needs if it wants to have any amount of longevity. Like there has to be a change in people around the table to some extent, and there has to be a change in approach.
If you're listening to this pod, you're a political junkie, and elections are our Super Bowl, or Grey Cup if you prefer, which I do. As you dig into riding by riding breakdowns, here's a number from our sponsor, Tik Tok Canada. 1.4 million. That's the number of visits during the campaign to Tik Tok Canada's Election Center, an in-app guide built with Elections Canada to help people register, find out where to vote, and learn about what to expect on Election Day. It also featured videos from Toronto Metropolitan University's Democratic Engagement Exchange that explained how the voting process worked. And ahead of the election, Tik Tok Canada worked with the Samara Centre to get advice from experts in keeping the platform secure. But here's the catch. The last federal government ordered Tik Tok to shut down its Canadian office, a move that would wipe out the teams responsible for building tools like this, along with hundreds of good local jobs. With a new government in Ottawa, there's an opportunity to pursue a balanced path, one that addresses security concerns while keeping the local teams and investments that support Canadian creators and businesses. More than 14 million Canadians use TikTok every month. Let's find a solution for TikTok that makes sense for Canada. But Kory, people are going to be listening to this, and they're going to be saying, well, what about the value of experience? What about knowing what it's like to be a member of parliament and how the House of Commons works? What about having been around and seen a minister do their job for a while before you have to get in there? Isn't there any value to experience?
Well, how well were they doing? like, like is this like working on your golf swing or something? Like you've got like horrendously bad habits, and you're gonna just go out and hack away. Is that better than learning how to do it correctly from the get-go? I don't know. Look, there is some value to experience, but probably a lot less than you think. Like who among Canadians could name you 10 people in the Trudeau cabinet? There are a lot of fucking losers and nobodies in that. I hate, I know that probably some of them are listening out there. I'm sorry, you guys. I'm sure you're all great people and your families know who you are. It's just nobody outside of.
To be clear, you can be a nobody without being a loser.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah.
But sometimes there's a correlation.
You can be a somebody and be a loser.
That's true. That's true.
I mean,
we definitely
occasionally
saw some
people
of those.
recognize me, but that doesn't mean I'm a winner. That's for fucking sure.
Sure, fair enough. But like there are people who were not well recognized because their experience in dealing with the media was to go out and give the lamest parroting and repetition of talking points ever spoken by a politician in a media interview. There was a lot of that. Like if you look at like what so what are the political skill set that you're looking for in a minister around that? Can you communicate? Can you explain things, right? But for every miller who could actually go and explain something in language that was understandable to Canadians and had the intestinal fortitude required to actually go and do an interview in the first place, or have a press briefing that actually came with responses, not just questions. There were 3 or 4 people who couldn't communicate their way out of a wet paper bag. And some of them smart and some of them not smart. And I'll not give my views on not smart, but I think Chrystia Freeland's smart, but I don't think she can communicate.
Right.
And so, or has demonstrated to have a real deficit in that area. I think all of that to say, I think you're better to go with more change and more new than not. And because if this entire endeavor, understanding your mandate, people voted for change. And insofar as people voted Liberal, a lot of them voted Liberal because they believed Carney was going to change things. And for the people who did not vote for the Liberal Party, they really, really want to change. Yeah. So, the mandate has changed. The mandate, Carney has got a huge mandate to disrupt things and to make major changes in how we manage the economy and the government. I think he's got an enormous mandate, but you better put some people in who get the brief. And if it looks and sounds and is like what the last government is, they're going to find out how quickly they can go back to 19, 20 points in the polls.
Scott, one thing I'm looking at is the Ministry of Finance, our old stomping grounds.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if you recall, but when Champagne endorsed Carney for the leadership, he made it sound like they were co-candidates.
I remember that.
It made it sound like it was Jonathan Petno and Elizabeth May.
It was very odd.
It was like, this is a partnership. This is an economic team. This is a this is a that. I wouldn't be at all surprised if he wasn't the Minister of Finance after tomorrow.
Here's hoping.
So look, me either. And I do remember that. And I remember how I thought it was odd at the time. And so there's 2 reactions to that, it seems to me, which now become uncomfortably relevant, right? One is that he has developed a relationship with Carney that allows that to be credibly said. And we don't know about that, which is entirely possible. People might be skeptical, but that's entirely possible. Or he's overreaching and being overly enthusiastic. We said we weren't going to sign portfolios. I'll tell you where I would put Champagne, and he's going to hate it. I'd make him House Leader. I'd make him House Leader because he is a genuinely enthusiastic guy. I would make him House Leader because
you're an ass.
No, because
you want to see.
Yes, I am.
You want to see a grown man cry? Is that why you want to do
it? I'm not shitting on the guy. I think he's fine. And look, everybody I know who deals with him says he has, unlimited reserves of energy, is genuinely nice to work with, and super enthusiastic. And so, my view as to House, when you're in a minority parliament, and we're down to 1 or 2 seats, but it's still like you got to be counting votes and you got to think about the misery of committees, and you're going to have to deal with the bloc. And he's a guy who comes from Francophone Quebec. So I think there's a logic there. Obviously, you want to have somebody at House Leader who can deal with both languages, and deal with somebody who's energetic and likable and can manage. I know he'd hate it. Ralph hated being House Leader. Remember how fucking angry he was? It's impossible. You can't, it's hard to get Ralph angry, right? But it was hurtful, and I'm sure it'd be hurtful to Champagne.
You can only tell when this vein on the side of his forehead is pulsating. That's when you know that he's angry.
So, stab in the dark, but I would really gamble on Leto in finance if I was Carney. I would trust my gut and get my own team in there. And, if you are going to have some degree of continuity just because the timber you have is the timber you have, all the more reason you got to put a couple of new faces in important places. And so I'd be very tempted on that front. I'd say one other thing, and that's going to be isn't just about, like, I don't think we have to say, oh, there's a bunch of people that did a shitty job and they're all losers and all that kind of stuff. I'm not going to follow Kory's lead on that. But my view is that, I mean, certainly if there are people that you do
name
think did
names,
poorly,
Scott, come on,
they're gone.
Do it.
But I also think, like, the public service is going to have to change. And
All right, well, stop, because we're going into that with the clipping, which you chose.
oh, that's right. Okay. All right. So
And we're
I'll
going into
reserve
that
that
with
for
the
that.
clipping. So let's go there right now. But just one quick question, just for the fun of our readers, just because I find this episode maybe has been not as a rollicking as some of them.
Good. Not as good. This
Let's
is
get
not. If you're looking for a good episode, maybe look elsewhere. Maybe search the archives. Thanks, David. That's really encouraging. We're halfway through it.
so Christia Freeland. Is this the return of Christia Freeland or the end of Christia Freeland?
I
What's
keep
your-
her. I would keep her, and I'll tell you what. One thing we haven't talked about: there has to be I mean, he wants to go from 9% per annum growth to 2%, and all the ministries and all the programs that he deigns to be operational, not capital. Imagine the rush to rebrand yourself as absolutely fundamental to capital growth. I would put Christian Freeland in charge of program review. And I know she's notionally done it before, but I'd be like, this program review has to be real. It has to be like 1993, 94, 95. And you head that up. That keeps you away from the microphone. You don't have to be a face of the government. You don't have to communicate in public very much. But you go out there and you have a mandate and make certain that you cut line items and you pare things down. And that's your test. And I'm giving it to you. And you have 6 months to make a difference. And if you don't, well then it's going to be the train station.
Right.
I think that is a very comms heavy role. Like if you're going to actually do program review and you're going to have to talk about all the shit you're not going to do and deal with stakeholders that are not going to be happy about that, there's a lot of comms in cutting the budget.
Yeah, well, although in the circumstance Scott's talking about, that actually fell to the finance minister. Nobody ever really knew who Marcel Massé was.
That's right.
Okay, so you're talking in the background. So
we're all victims of our own history. I was thinking exactly of that model, David.
Okay, so or maybe so maybe it's Treasury Board or something. Okay, sure.
Yeah, that's where I would put her. I'd put her in charge of that's exactly what. Sorry, I wasn't explicit. I'd say Treasury Board with a mandate to conduct a real program review.
But behind the scenes. Okay, great.
That's right.
Yeah, look, maybe something else. There are lots of jobs that require brains and a mastery of the mechanics of government and all of that. That's the kind of stuff that she should be doing. And whatever that looks like. I think she actually has been able to get along reasonably well with people in provincial governments too. That's why I think like transportation is you could do a lot worse. It's not in terms of match for her skill set. But to come back to first principles on this, whatever it is, it can't be in the center of the action, because like if there's one thing Mark Carney needs to do, it's break from the past in terms of the face and the look and the feel and the tone of this government. So, if you're gonna be around, you better not be in the window. And I fear for Pepe Le Pew, that's not good news.
Hurley Burleyites, like millions of Canadians, you're probably familiar with Heritage Minutes and the Canadian Encyclopedia, two great sources for learning about this country. They are, as the saying goes, part of our heritage. But you may not know as much about Historica Canada, the charitable organization that produces them. Some facts. Last year, Historica's programs reached 30 million users online in Canada and beyond. Each Heritage Minute is seen in its first month of release alone by more than 1 million viewers. The newest, about Bora Laskin, first Jewish Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, was viewed more than 200,000 times in one day last week. Another program, the Memory Project, connects students with veterans of our military to learn firsthand about their service past and present around the world. Then there's the Canadian Encyclopedia, with more than 26,000 articles on everything Canadian you can imagine. It's updated and fact-checked daily by a staff of 6 full-time editors. You can now access the encyclopedia in 35 other languages besides French and English with the click of an online button. Historica's materials are used coast to coast to coast by people of all ages, including students at hundreds of high schools and universities. Everything is available online and for free, because learning brings us together, And when others forget, Historica Canada remembers.
Can I just say one other additional thing on Freeland? Because I know I can be hard on her, and some people may even dislike my suggestion I just made. I know this was contrary to Canada's interests. I know it would have been contrary to Carney's interests, but an enormous part of me wanted him to turn to Trump when he started slagging Freeland without naming her and just say, hey, fucking back up, you misogynist goof. Who do we want? Linda McMahon? That's the kind of woman you want around you? Kiss our ass, okay? She wasn't just irritating you for the sake of being irritating. She was irritating you because she was having to say no to you. And we know that when you have a strong woman say no to you, you lose your mind. So I know that would have been a mistake, and Carney shows greater judgment than I do.
We were talking earlier about picking your fights, Scott.
I
know, but
I think you got to yell that into your pillow when you get home. I don't think
that's exactly it. Yes,
but,
exactly.
But yeah, no, it was like
it was a lot of yelling into my pillow.
It was pretty gross. It was pretty terrible, and but Trump, if he wasn't classless, what would he be? Like, it's just so par for his course.
Right. Okay, let's do this clipping. Catherine May in the Ottawa Citizen, but I think it might have originated with Policy magazine.
Yeah.
And let me just read a couple of segments of it here. There's growing chatter in senior bureaucratic circles that the new Carney government is exploring a different way to govern. Ms. Kory's hopeful. One that could execute plans for the biggest remake of Canada's economy since the Second World War. Thrust into office by Trump's trade war, Prime Minister Carney is trying to turn an economic crisis into a defining moment for the country. The big question, can government actually pull it off? So they're looking at this new model. The Trudeau people had a new model called Deliverology, which they took from the Brits. And now Catherine May says the government has a new model that they've taken from the Brits called mission government. Mission government aims to reshape how government works by breaking down silos and getting government's departments to work together on complex problems that cut across mandates, but with a clear accountability for results. Take housing. Instead of each department tackling its own narrow slice of housing policy, a mission approach pulls ministers and public servants together, budgets and all, around a single shared goal, like building more affordable housing. And then it says Stephen Harper set a precedent before these concepts had names. As Prime Minister in a minority government, he came in with 5 clear priorities. A powerful plans and priorities cabinet committee tracked them, and departments were expected to fall in line. So, Scott, you chose this article. What did you find interesting about it? Because you're not normally a process person.
Well, that's a grave insult and untrue. I'm a real machinery fanatic, a real engineer at heart. No, what I found interesting about it was two things.
Bureaucrats, when you were in government, thought you were like the Kool-Aid man, the guy that burst into their rooms unexpectedly and blew up everything they were doing.
That's not true. The bureaucrats loved me. I was respectful and interesting, and I like to learn things. I don't know why I got this reputation. It's not true. It's unfair. I thought it was interesting for kind of contradictory reasons. So if you listen to Catherine's description, by the way, she's been writing about the public service for 25 years, and hats off. Maybe that's not the most exciting and enchanting post, but there's no one in Canadian journalism who knows more or has done more. And so she's not just a journalist now, she's an authority. But it seems to me, if you read the definition of mission government, it sounds like Mark Carney. It sounds like, listen, I'm going to keep the focus on the focus. And so I've got 2 or 3 core priorities. And I know that other things have to get done. I'm not oblivious to that. But I'm going to be focused on these things. I'm going to be pretty demanding. And I'm going to be very utilitarian. And so if I don't like what's happening and I don't see sufficient progress, then, I hit the big button on my desk and you burst into flame and somebody else comes in on a moving sidewalk to take your spot. And, so it makes sense to me. I think if you didn't come at it as
bullshit models, whether
I know if you didn't come at it from the perspective, what's the newest bullshit trendy model?
Why don't they put in a 6 Sigma system and have black belts come in and handle housing for them?
I know, and that's what I don't like about it, right? But I think if you ignore the label And you go, well, that actually sounds like him. So I thought that was interesting, right? What makes me nervous, this is the contradictory thing, is exactly what you're saying, which is I hate all this management consultant horseshit speak. We're going to call this out. I got 3 slides, just 3 slides, because I know we don't like 8 slides, but I got 3 slides I'm going to show you that describe mission government, right? And then you go, oh, fuck, get this guy out of here before I strangle something. And so I worry about that. I worry about the attraction that we saw before, the flirtation with deliverology. You brought up the comparison. It obviously jumps off the page at you. It's the first thing people think of. And so I'll be
because it was a
interested to
miserable
see.
failure and nobody talked about it after about the 4th month of the government.
Right. So I
They
have
did.
faith in this. I have faith in this. Whether it's called mission government or deliverology or Jimmy Crack Corn, and I don't care. I have
What kind of
confidence
attitude is that?
that Mark Carney, it would be a bad name. I have confidence that Mark Carney will say, I want this to work. I want something to happen here and show me results, or I'm going to be up your nose. And I think the failure of deliverology, I wasn't there as an insider, but it seems to me, if it's emblematic of a bunch of things that happened in the Trudeau government, it was sometimes forgetting that press releases are not action or results. And so I'm hoping that he would be more demanding. If that's the methodology that it ends up looking like, swell. If not, I don't care, as long as there's a maintained concentration on a few things and moving the yardsticks on those things. And I think that means
You really want, Scott, is a mandate letter that isn't 7 pages long.
I for sure do want that. Right? I'm like, here's the templated mandate letter. You get that because you're not one of 5 portfolios that touch on the 3 priorities I care most about. Everybody else gets a 2-paragraph thing, which, by the way, ends with "come see me and don't be fucking late." I think that's the prime minister that we need and that we probably have. And I do think that means that the public service is going to get a dose of salts, because I think they're going to be asked to do things they're not used to doing. And I think they know that, but I don't know that they feel that yet. And so if he needs a new clerk, get a new clerk. If he needs a new finance minister, get a new finance minister. You need to bust up some of the machinery so that you can destabilize some of the mechanisms that are in place. Great. But I thought this was interesting because it forces this discussion of the machine is going to have to shift because there is a new factory foreman and he is not going to be interested in the same old. At least I hope.
Oh, okay, let's hope. But similar to the conversation about cabinet, if it's like being executed by the people who did that horrific platform that the Liberals put out during their campaign, then good fucking luck, because that looked a lot like warmed over Trudeau pablum in many respects. And I take your point, Scott, but a narrow mandate, a lot of clarity, and probably being quite prescriptive would serve him well.
That's what I think he will get from him, I hope.
But if it's, as you said, David, a 7-page mandate letter that includes, all kinds of extraneous bullshit, which is kind of what my takeaway of the platform was. So there was a lot of extraneous bullshit in there.
Right.
That, the government will lose its focus. It will settle back into the comfortable habits of the last, 8-9 years. And it'll be right back to where Trudeau's government was, in very short order. Like
you don't have much time if you're going to do something transformational, you don't have much time. Right. Like I'm just scanning the headlines this morning. I see a headline about how Nova Scotia is backing off, getting rid of some interprovincial trade barriers. And I saw, BC government saying, well, we're not going to build anything that doesn't have full Indigenous support. And you can just sort of feel the energy coming out of the room a little bit in terms of this all systems go, we're going to build mentality, right? The crisis is seeming a little bit more distant, and the conditions that were ripe for transformational change start to ebb away.
I know it's not politic. I know it's not politic in this world of like Gen Zers who are like, I was wondering if I'm going to get a coffee card with my job, but I want people crying at their desks at 10 p.m. I really do. Like, I want people who are like, I feel so fucking under a mountain of pressure. If I can't get this done, I know it's going to matter. And so I want people like just like, you got to create that environment, not an environment of fear, but an environment of absolute all in.
An
Nothing else
environment of
matters. I'm
focus.
sorry, I'm not going to be home, husband. I'm
It,
not going to be home for dinner,
it
right? I just think you
I don't
gotta.
think it's fear. I don't think like he needs to
No,
kick down
it's
doors and yell at people.
no.
But I think you need to be limited in scope. I think you have to be very clear on the outcomes you want, and I think probably quite prescriptive in how you want to get there if you want to have uh, government actually execute on something. Like I think leadership at the
A
top
little
is
fear,
essential.
a little fear, though. A
Well,
little fear,
yeah,
little
well,
fear that maybe I'm not going to get that promotion. Little fear that I'm going to be moved
sure,
to the sideline if I can't get this
sure,
done. That causes you to
sure.
cry at 10 p.m. at your desk. I think a little fear might help.
Sure, a little fear in normal ways is
And
probably
you guys are asking a lot, to hit the ground running like this because I mean, lots of governments don't. Like Scott, you remember the Paul and Cretchit pissed away the first year of the government in 93, 94, right? Paul's first budget was not a success, wasn't considered to be a success, wasn't considered to have met the moment of its time. It took them a little while to find their
But
feet.
well,
But it was the
David, but
failure of that first government, that first budget, that created the crisis. That's what created the Wall Street Journal editorial, which then gave us license to do the things that people don't allow you to usually do. And I think we've already got that moment going here, which is why we can't. There can't be room for
you can't
hit the ground running. You got to do it now. You got to hit the ground
you
running.
can't compare 93, 94 when you've been out of government for a decade to the position you're in now, inheriting a sitting government with a lot of sitting members, and that was a majority government. This is a minority, although almost a majority. I see up to 170 now,
Yeah.
but uh, there is a crisis going on. There is a need to do things quickly, and let's not forget that why Carney got elected is a promise to do big things quickly and to be transformational. Like, understand your mandate. Understand your mandate. This is why it's so important that it not be a cabinet of Trudeau retreads. Because if that was on offer, he would not have won. Like,
I remember the
people
line pretty
wanted
well.
change.
Bigger things than we have previously imagined at speeds we had previously not thought possible.
Yeah.
Right. But that's what, and it's not that, it's going to be a completely new team. Obviously, there are going to be a lot of people who are, whether it's on the public servant side or whether it's on the caucus and cabinet side, there are going to be people who are going to be retooled and thrown into the fight. But it's got to be living up to what that mandate was, which is to move quickly and get shit done. And if there's two hallmarks that were never associated with the Trudeau government, was moving quickly and getting shit done. Like, they couldn't get a fucking passport out the door, let alone get big important things done in a timely way, or in a way that didn't piss everyone off in the process. So I think there's enormous goodwill out there for this government to fulfill that mandate. And he's got to go and do it.
Beware of the title pagers. Beware of the ministers, the deputies, the ADMs who come to you, and they have slapped a new title page on an old policy they've been trying to get through the machinery of government for 10 years. And now the title page is capital not operating. It's build, baby, build, right? And it tries to capture that. So see, we're completely aligned here. And it's just like, no, you were just trying to smuggle in something you've wanted to do forever under the prime minister's new imprimatur. So you gotta weed that stuff out. And you need a clerk and a machinery that's going to weed that stuff out.
Excellent. All right. Well, I would love to go get myself another cup of coffee and sit here and chat politics with you people all fucking day. But unfortunately, people have to get on with their lives. Our listeners have to get on with their lives. So let's have our hey yous.
Ladies and gentlemen, please return to your seats. The hey yous are about to begin.
We've had lots of criticism of the Conservative campaign from me and on this podcast. But I want to throw out a suggestion, a hey you, to I don't know whether it's Bevan or who it is, but the Liberal campaign was not very good. It was not a very good campaign. And I think sometimes when you win, you really need to do a postmortem, maybe even more than when you lose, or at least as much. But there were some things that I think did not go very well for the Liberal campaign. And I've seen a lot of self-congratulation out there. I've seen a lot of back patting and the rest. And I think if I were the Liberals, I would be spending some time really going through what went on in that campaign, going through your ad stack, going through your polling, going through, your platform and like what landed and what didn't. And, how is it that we fucked up the last 3 weeks of the campaign so badly? Like there's a bunch of stuff that I think is really worth uh, some time being spent on it. And I got to say, no disrespect to you, David, and in your podcast on the Hurley Burley, like talking about the campaign, I didn't see any self-reflection or even basic understanding of what the fuck went on there.
No, they're using a January baseline and considering it a miracle, as opposed to using a March baseline and considering it a failure. So, Scott, you got a hey you?
Trying to think of what baseline I should use in order to render myself a success, and it's not jumping out at me. My
I do
hey
that all the
goes out-
time with respect to physical fitness. Like compared to somebody in a wheelchair, boy, can I jump.
Exactly. Yeah. The guy who can only do one push-up, I got that guy crushed. I'm gonna like stick with my love of process machinery, and my hey you is gonna go to PCO.
Oh, really?
It is. My hey you goes to PCO, which is to say you got a chance here. Like you got a chance to show that you can actually deliver, because our working assumption is that for a decade you've worked for a prime minister in a government that wasn't always able to generate results. Now, to be fair, a lot of stuff did happen during COVID. A lot of unprecedented, impressive, creative, inventive policy and execution and results. But you got a moment, and I would just say deliver. And I think, you got 2, 3, 4 months to demonstrate that you can deliver. And if you can't, don't be surprised if your nameplate's gone. I just think this is a huge opportunity for PCO to demonstrate that it can actually achieve. And you know what? That would be such a good thing if we could actually demonstrate that government can actually say we're going to do something and then do it, and do it in a timeline and a schedule where people say, I actually remember when the promise was made and now it's been delivered. How about that? So that's my AU. I hope we get to see that.
Yeah, public service could use that credibility enhancement. That's for sure. My hey you goes out to, I occasionally drift over to Twitter and just peruse it and see what the fuck is going on. And this weekend, I saw a very large number of conservatives tweeting about Elections Canada and these recounts, and about how the election is rigged, and about how these recounts are rigged, and how is it possible that they win by one vote? Surely that's bogus. And and I see these accounts being egged on by some prominent conservatives, and I'm just going to say, back off. Like these allegations are A, without any foundation. And second of all, this takes us down an extremely dark road, as we know from just looking south of the border. So let's not get into a world of questioning the election results, because there's one thing we should be able to agree on in Canada is that Elections Canada is a fully impartial organization, and that this is all done above board and the results are the results. Unless you two have a different point of view, that is got to be the operating standard in this business.
I don't believe the polls. I believe the rallies.
Right.
There's an element of that that's out there. And look, I think the contagion south of the border, in this case, is infecting Canada to a degree, but I think things south of the border often do. Like I think we got infected by the the woke mind virus stuff also. Like I think, these things do communicate across the border, and they get picked up and repeated on social media. Although I will give you this recommendation, David, for your mental well-being, and to maintain the high level of intellect that you demonstrate on every podcast, stay the fuck away from Twitter.
Yeah,
Stay away from X. Like it is an insane
always a
asylum.
mistake.
It's an insane asylum crossed with an open sewer that makes you stupider when you spend time on it.
That's how I feel. All right. Thank you, guys. This was awesome. Great show. We'll have Jordan back next week, I think, and it'll be even better. But we did well today, I think, just the three of us. I want to thank our presenting sponsor, Telus. As always, our presenting sponsor, Telus, and CN, Candu, Tik Tok Canada, and Historica Canada for their support of this podcast. All you accursed out there for joining us on our now weekly exploration of the vicissitudes of Canadian politics. All right. See you next week. We'll be back. Kory, Scott, great to have you. Take care of yourselves.